Anime. I'm sure even if you've never watched anime before, you most certainly have a few ideas in mind. And as an avid anime fan, I am embarrassed to say that not all of them are the best examples, and most women in anime aren't good examples of women at all. Rather, in anime, there seems to be this need to fulfill specific tropes in which women fall under, a feminine trope, if you will. Some of these lean more into heavy traditionalism, or the direct opposite of traditionalism in femininity and womanhood, if you will. The four that I want to discuss in today's video would be a support, a mother, a partner, and femme fatale. Overall, all these characters and archetypes are important to storytelling, but I would like to talk about how when women take on these roles, there's a certain air of misogyny. Now, before I get too deep into this video, and all the men, women, and NBs out there that absolutely adore these characters that I'll be criticizing, or the shows that I'll be criticizing, say it's how Japan is culturally, or things are different in Japan. Firstly, this video isn't for Japanese viewers. It's for anyone speaking English, and anyone who is a fan or not a fan of anime but wants to hear me critique how women are treated in media. If you couldn't tell, I'm speaking English, so my main audience here isn't going to be Japanese people. I'm going to be giving a Western stance on a lot of these archetypes that we see in specifically this culturally Japanese medium, because it's important to critique the things you love. And I think it's important to critique the medium that I love, as someone who is a fan of a lot of the characters and shows I'm going to be discussing in this here video right now. Secondly, yes, Tom, we get it. You are an expert on Japan after your one trip last year, where now you know anything and everything about everything that happens. I'm sure that you know exactly what the Japanese people want, and you totally did not take advantage of a government that takes more care and consideration towards money, assets, and capitalism than their own fucking people, by pandering to both tourism and hyper late-stage capitalism created for people like you who take advantage of the people who actually live, breathe, eat, and suffer in the culture in which you love to fetishize. If you fall under either of those two mindsets that I'm discussing, where you think that either I know nothing because Japan's a different culture and I'm some stupid white person, that's fair and that's valid. Don't watch. Or if you are under the mindset that you know everything about Japan and you're going to put me in my place in the comments, feel free. However, if you are willing to do yourself a favor and stay here, I'll probably be ripping your favorite waifu to shreds, and not in that Rule 34 way we know you love to do on a Thursday night. With all that being said, indulge me, won't you, as I tell you about the necessity of the feminine woman in anime. Alright, before we get too deep into this, yes, ma'am. I'm going to be talking about her later, and you'll see her pop up somewhere over here, over there, somewhere on screen. And before someone says it, I know my hair is purple and it's not the right color. Shut up. Maybe. Do me that favor. Because I dyed my hair back a while ago to be a different character, and I'm a natural blonde, so it made sense to be a blonde character because it's growing out blonde. Anyways, let's talk about the support women. Now, the women support character has a few defining characteristics, these usually being something to consist with supporting. Healing, not required, but is normally often used, and or buffing, and or increase intelligence, and or any method in which they can support the main character or main cast. Sometimes they're not even a part of the main cast. They have important features, but pale in comparison to their male counterparts traditionally. Now, is it a bad thing to make your female characters supportive? That's obviously not what I'm saying. Women can be support-based characters. Any of these things women can support, and they are able to have impressive feats whilst being more of a supporting role than a leading role. However, the issue arises when we look at how commonplace it is for this role specifically to be so gender lack of diversity, and how we've just become kind of comfortable with this trope being a woman, and not only being a woman, but a woman who pales in comparison to her male counterparts. Rather than pushing the boundaries of storytelling and allowing these women to go more than just supportive roles, we still keep them in that tight little knit box of a female character can't be more than an assistant, a support, and or a guiding compass. Take Naruto, for example. A shining guide of this trope is, firstly, all the females in Naruto and the entire anthology of that show. At this point, Naruto is something everyone knows about, at least vaguely. You know who Naruto is, the namesake of the show.
Believe it!
As well as his lover, oh my god, really close friend, Sasuke. I'm sure everyone knows of these characters, but there's one girl on the team that whenever you say, everyone scoffs. Sakura! Sakura is a character that honestly I don't feel I need to explain why she is such a massive letdown. 2 of the 3 protagonists in the show become basically kaiju monster slayers, whereas Sakura becomes a medical ninja, who's damn good at her job, however, is nothing compared to her 2 counterparts, Sakura and her mentor, that is. The Sakura and her master, Tsunade, both have the same feat of being medical ninjas, and with that being said, are both powerful in their own right, but once again, pale in comparison to their male counterparts. Sakura was a character made in the shadow of character. Both Tsunade and Sakura are honestly badass. It's established in the series that it is one of, if not the most difficult things to learn medical ninjutsu. But both of these characters managed to achieve mastery of medical ninjutsu. Not only both of these characters master this ability, they also go above and beyond reaching the pinnacle of this ability, creating a technique and studies that are deemed near impossible to achieve and master, even mastering the ultimate technique of medical ninjutsu, creation rebirth. This technique is literally compared to immortality. I'll never forget the moment that Tsunade gives her speech about what it means to be a medical ninjutsu for the 50th time, just for her to change the final part.
第4項忍法創造再生白毛の術を極めし医療忍者のみ上気の掟を発揮できるが
白毛の術だと聞いたこともない。
Finally, one of our female characters gets a moment to represent. So much of what is wrong with the series is that it portrays these women to have these moments, and 9 times out of 10 get overshadowed by men in some way. They either aren't relevant and compared to men, and or get sliced in two. Even when Tsunade gets a chance to finally show her strength and break out of the supporting class, she still gets punished and put back into the supporting character role. Now, obviously we all know that Naruto isn't the best of examples, and honestly it's a little bit dated, so why don't we look at a more modern version of this character, Shoko from Jujutsu Kaisen. Similar to Tsunade and Sakura, Shoko has achieved one of the most difficult feats in her canonical universe. She can use reverse curse technique to heal other people, which not just is impressive that she can use reverse curse technique, it's unheard of beyond very few examples to be able to use reverse curse technique to heal others, which is astonishing, frankly, and it makes her one of the strongest and most important characters in the show. So with such an important and amazing accomplishment, she must be important, right? No. She's relegated to basically being locked up 24/7, as her technique is too important to lose. And now, to be clear, this is the right decision, and this makes sense narratively. If you have a character that defies the laws of physics, you'd want to keep them under lock and key, and you'd want them to be safe. But her being locked up for most of the series, other than small bits and pieces of her being let out of her little enclosure out of her enrichment time, means that such an important character is often forgotten about by viewers. Every time she makes an appearance, we are constantly reminded of her importance to the story and to other characters, but she never really gets her time to shine. She never heals someone in a dire moment. She never goes off on her intellect other than being told that she graduated med school. We never actually get to see her use any of these things that we hear about. We're being told how important she is, but we don't actually really know, and nor do we ever get to see. Shoko gets no time to shine, except for the one time where both of our male leads express his need to make sure that no one else suffers like he did. Finally, we get an emotional insight into Shoko as a character. We get to make her feel human. She's not just some nurse who sits around and does nothing. We get to see Shoko, which is such an important aspect, and it is one of the most influential parts of the series to me. When she asks, what about her? Was she not a part of the story this whole time? Almost as the writer himself is acknowledging Shoko has been left in the dust in comparison to the other characters. Now, the important thing about JJK is that it's still ongoing, at least at the time of recording this and writing this. After all, Shoko appears to be playing a prominent role in the next part of the manga and in the upcoming arc, so my hope is that there's still hope. You could theoretically say that about our next victim of supporting female trope. However, most of the damage to this character is done, so even if the series is still ongoing, she really can't be saved. Fairy Tail's Wendy is such a great example of this trope that she even breaks the unwritten rules of her series just to fit into the supporting woman trope. Wendy being a part of the infamous Dragon Slayer subclass of magic wielders is quite a large, tall glass of power and strength and mystery around her. A notorious destructive subclass, you would assume that her magic would be a force of nature, similar to our main character Natsu, or even our steel dragon. Well, kind of. See, Wendy is a force of nature, but specifically in the subclass of support magic. Now, this is not to say that Wendy is not capable of offensive magic, although she can be offensive. She often can't do it to an efficient means. She is also the only female Dragon Slayer, I will add, known in the series, at this moment of course, who is oh so clearly overshadowed by every other Dragon Slayer, even the non-official ones that they later create in the series. With her feats being unmemorable, I literally had to Google them. She supported the cast a lot in almost every fight that she's a part of, and one of the final arcs in the series, she does indeed beat one of the big bads. But by the time you get there, you've probably already dropped the series because, frankly, as a Fairy Tail fan, it takes a lot to get that deep. But it's okay, because she's not the only support-based female character in the cast. There is another, and she's even on Wendy's team. Lucy! Lucy is one of the only characters on this list that somewhat breaks the mold of the supportive character in which I'm talking. Her magic doesn't actually directly help people, nor does she heal people. However, the supportive role she takes is more so to do with what she does for the team and the group, rather than her physical capabilities. As for her role as a supportive woman, she provides the cast and the audience with someone who could have been a decent straight man, someone who sees how weird and wacky everything is and points it out. Yet, she becomes so bland and so much of a straight man that she ends up doing the opposite, with 9 out of 10 times of the plot, her not being all that relevant other than getting kidnapped, screaming, crying, or getting mad at our character. Hell, even in her moment of self-sacrifice for the others, she is told no, and although yes, it is a great moment for her and the group of people in which she has become a chosen family of, her one moment of independence is still stolen from her, and is still not given to her, and others need to come in and save her. Finally, with all these wrongs, why don't we discuss how you write a femme support character? Shinobu Kocho is the first capable female in Demon Slayer that we actually get introduced to in the Demon Slayer Corps. So capable that she's managed to achieve the rank of Hashira, which is among, if not the highest rank you can achieve in Demon Slayer. She is further painted as capable through demonstrating her ability to overcome her own weaknesses, not being strong enough to slice off a demon head, you know, the whole only way you can kill a demon thing, and rather find a creative way around it using her agility in order to slash them with poison and kill them over time. Another thing that goes into play here is that Shinobu is head of a medical division. She runs the Butterfly Mansion, which is the primary medical support for all Demon Slayers. And after our first time meeting her, we, the viewer, don't get to see that much of her, but we do get closer to her by the end of the series, and we get to see her in contrast to the other Hashiras, resulting in us finding out that she is in fact very capable. Shinobu is an example of writing female characters whose strengths do not lie in being a strong fighter and rather a supportive role, both story-wise and capability-wise. And you can write them among capable men who don't need to upstage or overshadow her and or make her inclusion as a character feel unnecessary. The term mother has gained a lot of popularity recently, with terms associated with ballroom and general queer culture being brought into the spotlight. This is not the mother in which I'm referring to, though. Rather, I'm discussing the female role in motherhood and parental guidance, if you will, that gets placed on many female figures in anime. The mishandling of characters who often fall into that role of motherhood have more to do with the problems of society when looking at mothers than actually anime in itself. For example, they're carers. They take care of others, and more importantly, their entire existence revolves around the existence of men in their lives. But most times in media, when mothers are brought up, it has to do with some sort of relationship to a man, whether it be her husband or lover or the parent / father of the child in which the story revolves around. This isn't to say characters that I'm about to discuss have all given birth, because frankly, not all of them have. However, what it is to say is that when someone is in the role of a mother, they are nothing more than the carer, the provider, the woman of the house who cares for the children and or the husband and or anyone else around them. And rather, there is no further character outside of being a mother to them. Starting off with one of the most famous animanga mothers in history, you probably don't remember her name, but Carla Yeager. Now, I'll be honest, I had to Google to figure out her name because I know her as Eren Yeager's mother. And that speaks as much on her as it does most of the mothers in anime. After all, you most likely know Eren's father's name, Grisha, because Grisha gets a prominent role. Grisha gets a name, and Grisha gets to have mystique. Grisha gets to be a part of this conspiracy, if you will. Grisha is more than meets the eye, whereas Carla is just a waitress who died in order for her son to have character development. For without Carla, we wouldn't have the screaming brat of Eren Yeager to tell us how much he needs to kill Titan. For the limited time we know her, she spends her time nagging Eren. She tells the father of Eren, Grisha, to deal with him and to get rid of his stupid ideals in becoming a scout. And after we get very little to know about her other than she cares for her children, she dies for Eren's character development. Now, in contrast to Carla, Eren's father also dies. As I said, Grisha dies, theoretically. However, Grisha in the story is almost never taken out of it. He's influential. He impacts Eren. His life decisions go further beyond just him and in fact affect his children. Not just him, but another primary character in the series who is one of our primary antagonists to become primary allies to then become a primary antagonist again. Grisha remains relevant throughout the entire story, almost to the entirety of the final season, whereas Eren's mother gets dropped beyond a few mentions here and there for the rest of the story and really is left in the dust. This isn't to say that characters can't be written to die in order to motivate another character. Hell, I've got no place to stand considering I've written characters that whole sole purpose in the story is to later die and further motivate a character. However, it is to say that it's funny how it's always the mother. It's so common that it's always a male protagonist mother that there's an ongoing joke within the anime fandom of the Dead Mother Club, or the Dead Mom Club, or however you want to call it. We often in anime see the fathers take a much more grounded and real role as a parental figure, or we get father figures who are more down to earth. Take Main, for example, in Cyberpunk. Whereas mothers tend to die off very quickly, easily, and traditionally don't have any long-lasting effects beyond their initial death and or motivation of either their child, their loved ones, or other motivating factors in the world, such as demonstrating how dangerous the world is, or how destructive it is, or how terrible it is to live in, that someone would lose their own mother. It's a role that in isolation is fine, but when you take the context of some of the characters I'm going to discuss, such as Carla Yeager, you realize that there's a little bit more to the role of mom than meets the eye. Well, for some. Take, for example, our next mother in discussion, Kikyo from Hunter x Hunter, aka the matriarch of the Zoldyck bloodline. Now, our first introduction to Killua parents, the Zoldyck family, if you will, is through a description. He was raised by deadly assassins, dangerous assassins, the most dangerous people in the world, if you will. And they're described in how raising Killua involved torture, involved many terrible acts, and involved some less than healthy methods of raising a child. Admittedly, none of Killua's family is painted nicely, nor are they painted as good people. However, there is a drastic contrast between Silva, the patriarch, and Kikyo, the matriarch. Now, Kikyo is our first impression of the two parents. She is the first of the two that we meet, and we get more screen time with her than we do Silva. She makes a much worse impression than Silva, however, even with her almost double screen time. In almost all of her interactions on camera, we see her making a fool of herself and honestly not being taken seriously by both the viewer, writer, and even the characters in the story. She's portrayed as incompetent, an overbearing helicopter parent whose opinion is often ignored or outright invalidated by both Killua as well as every other member of the Zoldyck family, but specifically Silva Zoldyck and Zeno Zoldyck, who tend to not take any of her opinions into account, even though she is the matriarch of the family and theoretically, as a family of very deadly assassins, should have much more standing, if you will. Rather, her antics are treated as outrageous and unreasonable, and although she is outrageous and unreasonable, you would think that her husband and or father-in-law would at least have some merit to her, at least in universe, to prove that to the viewers she's taken seriously by her family. But at no point is she given any serious merit. Rather, both Zeno and Silva tend to brush her off and just ignore the things that she flounders about, if you will. She is treated in the same way that you treat your grandmother's old white crusty dog that yaps too much, usually annoying but can be amusing in its own stupidity. In contrast, both of the patriarchs of the family are treated with high regard and respect. Silva not only is treated as this fearsome person who you instantly from meeting know is a force of nature to be reckoned with, but also is given much more of a human side, allowing Killua to go with his friends and meet his friends, and proving that not only is Silva capable and competent, unlike his wife, he also has a human side to him, even if later on that human side is shown to be more mischievous and less generous as it is painted. He is still treated in high esteem. However, it is the manner in which both of these parental figures are presented that really does show a lot of red flags. Kikyo goes into hysterics, panics, and is honestly a joke, a comedic character, if you will, whereas Silva is down to earth, respectable, reasonable, and not only that, a force to be reckoned with. Kikyo seems to not be able to even tie her own shoes without help in the way that she's portrayed, honestly. And to contrast Kikyo, we have my next example, which is a very capable woman, but the issue lies within the male characters written around her. Evangelion. A massive cultural impact throughout the years, and I'll be honest, prior to this year, I didn't understand it, nor did I realize why it was so culturally impactful. Rather, I have just now recently watched it, and prior to this year of watching it, the only thing I knew about it was redhead Asuka, who's kind of bitchy, and the whiny main character, Shinji. That's changed, and I can't help but notice my favorite character in the entire series falling under this terrible mother trope. Misato Katsuragi is a character with goals, ambitions, and motives. She isn't a bad character. Actually, she's one of the more well-written characters in the series. Not that any are particularly bad, but you can't help but love Misato. I genuinely haven't met someone who hates her, at least not yet. Feel free to prove me wrong in the comments. Misato has many issues, and so does everyone else in Evangelion, honestly. It's why I think it's resonated with so many people, even beyond its time. It's why it even resonated with me. We, the viewer, and Shinji are both introduced to her avid hobby of drinking at the exact same time. And as we unpeel more and more layers of Misato, we find out that she is in fact a broken woman. A broken woman who was broken by the men in her life. Almost every aspect of Misato's trauma, and by proxy, herself as a person and her motives, revolve around men. She wants to be the mentor that she never got, her father, who died prematurely. She wants her life to serve a greater purpose, since her father gave his to ensure that she lived. She wants to indulge in all the fun and crazy activities her and her situationship can do. She wants to feel important, and for Misato, much of this importance is derived from men. Even the company she works for, which, hell, she essentially runs all by herself, she still answers to a man above her. She still answers to a man who plans to betray her. And in the end, in a mission to defy this very man who has controlled her whole working career, she still loses it all. Not just to him, but to his son. Misato's relationship with men is her own tragedy. She loses many important men in her life, and then she's controlled and manipulated by one her entire adult career. She cares for his son in place of a mother that couldn't. She dies putting her trust in him to make the right decision. She dies for a man because of another man. With all that being said, we have my final example. A woman who has no men in her life to control her and has really no connection to men other than motherhood and what it means to be a mother, which still, technically in this universe, has no connection to men. My shining star of motherhood, exclusive from men, Isabella from Promised Neverland. Promised Neverland is a story of conflict between a daughter and her mother, Emma and Isabella. The crux of the entire series is the metaphorical chess game of which the children of the manor play with Isabella. She is almost perfect, seemingly omnipotent. But at the end of the day, she's still human, a mother, and even she makes mistakes. The pull and push between Isabella and the children, specifically Emma, shows us how one can be and how one can write a motherly figure without involving the necessity of men in one story. Emma shows us how motherly figures can be much more when they aren't forced into the role of just being a mother, when they're not forced to be mother and father, when they're not forced to play half of a role that is of two different characters. Isabella is conniving. She's independent, she's intelligent, and above all else, she is motivated to achieve her goals. Not just some cold, calculated villain. She's these children's mother. She's putting them on the line in order to save herself, but she does care for them, as we see in that last bit of hope in her eyes when Emma finally beats her at her own game.
さよなら、ママ。行かないで、エマ。私の可愛い子供たち。いってらっしゃい。気をつけてね。願わくば、その先に光がありますように。
And although there are many male characters around her, they never defined her or affect her to a degree of motherhood. Yes, there is one that affects her for the rest of her life, but Isabella is not defined by that. She is never defined by motherhood in the way that we see others. She does love her children, and she wants them to be happy. But she also wants to live. She wants to, above all else, guarantee her own survival and safety. She cares for them, and above all else, Isabella is their mother, no matter what they say. She isn't a good one, but she is a mother without the necessity. The next category on my list of women almost only are written for men and are revolving around their male counterparts. The partner. For me, it's been over a week. Now, the partner class of feminine women or women representation in anime is the most self-explanatory. It's the one you see the most often, specifically in anime, but also in general media as a whole. These are characters that are written to complement the main characters, and/or the main cast, and/or just other characters around them. Traditionally, as obvious with the whole theme of the video, they're women who are most often romantic counterparts to other characters who are more relevant or more important, as to give the more relevant characters more depth and more interest to them, forming a relationship. Although most primary examples of this is romantic, they're not all romantic. And this was originally actually called the lovers category, but I changed it to partners because I realized one of my examples in this, the first one, is a sibling. So that's a bit weird and a bit hard to go for. So, we're now talking about partners. So, although partners does imply romantic interest, it's more so to do with a counterpart to a main character or a more relevant character. A foil, if you will. You know what? It's probably best if I go into one of my examples to give you a better idea. Characters that would be nothing without their male counterparts. Let's start off with Demon Slayer's Nezuko. Now, unlike our previous mention of Shinobu, Nezuko is directly tied to a man, specifically Tanjiro, and everything she does is quite literally tied to Tanjiro. There is never a moment, really, that we get to see fleshed out where Nezuko is not tied to Tanjiro in some matter of fact. holy fuck, this piece of hair is gonna get annoying. With a large portion of the series, we don't even see her on screen. Rather, she's just implied to be in a box that's being carried around by Tanjiro like a little, honestly, dog in a bag. Like a little valley girl dog in a bag. Nezuko is treated in the same kind of light. Although she is technically always there, we never actually get to see her, or if we do, it's very limited. The only time we do get to see her is when Tanjiro is in dire need of saving. When Tanjiro can't get the job done, Nezuko always so happens to be rested up and ready to pop out of that box and save the day. So essentially with Nezuko, we never get to see her unless the plot demands her to be out, unless Tanjiro needs her to save the day, unless she is necessary for the others to have victory. The whole crux of this class is not being able to exist without the partner that is more relevant. For example, Tanjiro and Nezuko. Tanjiro, for example, the main character of the entire series. But Nezuko, of course, has some memorable lines. She can't talk. At least not until the most recent time, in which she still has very limited speech. And before all demons prior to this, they can all talk. So Nezuko is a special exception. A special exception that just so happens to only exist when the plot demands her to. So here we have a partner who is always by our main character's side, has no independence nor will of her own essentially, and honestly is never on screen unless the plot is necessary of her. Oh, I forgot to tell you, she also occasionally has massive tits. And she's an 11-year-old.
You need to leave!
This issue honestly isn't just limited to Nezuko though, and there are many side female casts in Demon Slayer that get sidelined for much more relevant men, such as Tengen's wives, who I previously mentioned, who are told to the viewer to be very capable ninja, except for the fact that they're never actually shown to be that capable. Sure, they do assist in the fighting of a demon, however, most of the time, two of them are whining or complaining, and only one of them really seems to be actually capable. And as you can see, this is a further issue that comes into this category of partners. These characters are defined by their relationship with another character, a more relevant character, if you will. Nezuko is not independent. She has no real drive nor motivator other than Tanjiro. Sure, she saves people and she's a good person, but without Tanjiro, she would not have a place in the story. She quite literally is a plot device and narrative tool used for Tanjiro whenever he is in a bind or necessary to have a specific measure of growth. And speaking of women who cannot do anything without their partner, let's move on to our next character, whose whole story revolves around this concept. Gasai. Now I know. Gasai is already a pretty controversial character from the moment of me mentioning her and or the moment of you seeing her. She's from the anime Future Diary, which embodies the concept of a partner character to a T. She is a very specific genre labeled as a yandere, a character that is known only for existing for a protagonist and or male character, and she embodies this role to an egregious amount. Not only is a very capable combatant, she proves that she is intelligent, cunning, and enough to win this free-for-all to become God. However, after becoming the next rendition of God itself, she chooses to start all over again, just to give the man she loves a chance to have the world that he dreams of, Yuki. Now, is no shining star. She is a murderer, she has many screws loose, and has dedicated her godhood to creating an entire new reality to the man that doesn't even entirely like her. Not even love her, but like her half the time. Not just one reality, but to the point that the viewer understands, Yuno has created many alternate timelines and alternate universes. Yuno has dedicated her entire existence to creating a world in which her lover, or her wanted lover, Yuki, can find and be okay with. She wants him to become God, but in a way that he can accept. Yuki, for the most part of the series, is entirely incompetent, if I'm being honest. And even in his competent moments, they're very dependent on Yuno. Yuki uses her undying love for him to his advantage. After all, it honestly seems like Yuno was built just to make him the next god in this game. Furthermore, as the story goes on, Yuno never really has autonomy. She is written solely for Yuki and everything that he wants, and is written solely to make sure he achieves his goal. No matter how many times she goes through the same timeline, she insists that she must have the same goal. Yuki. She never grows to change, she never develops from that goal, and from a point in which we meet her, she is stagnant. She is, the girl, who is also, the god of time and space. We know she is only there for uplifting and the creation of the god Yuki. She is the equivalent to a slave with godly potential. A slave to a man-child, similar to our next character, Mikasa Ackerman. Now, since Attack on Titan has not just aired, but very recently aired in the timeline of me recording this video, I'm going to try and steer away from spoilers, but obviously, with everything, there is implied spoilers. Mikasa Ackerman, first season of Attack on Titan, proves that she is Eren's partner, but that will not hold her back. Then we get into later seasons, and Mikasa begins to dedicate her life to Eren entirely. Mikasa is the most interesting actual character, in my opinion, on this segment of the video, because she is a character that goes from not so much independent, but a capable character, and a character who is able to be independent outside of her partner character, but then becomes completely incapable of independence, and becomes very dependent on Eren, to a point that it ruins not only her life, but everyone else's in the world. Everything she does eventually revolves around Eren. Without him, she would simply fall over and die. From when he is kidnapped to the betrayal of humanity, the willful ignorance Mikasa displays does not suit her sheer capable nature the younger self once showed. She goes from being a calculated, skilled slasher to a Titan slasher that serves one man and one man alone. Beyond Eren, Mikasa has convinced herself that she has nothing. She is surrounded by comrades and people that she loves and cares for, and they love and care for her. But once she loses Eren, she loses all sight of what's important. She becomes rash, unreasonable, and a shell of the character of who she really is. Even in Eren's final moments in the series, in the climax of her story, she is still compared to a slave. Her story is given to two male protagonists to tell. She not only loses her purpose, but she also loses her own narrative, her voice, to the very same man she worshipped. When it comes to characters like Mikasa, like Yuno, like... who the fuck did I say earlier? Like Nezuko, no matter the gender, it can be difficult to write characters in this genre and not have them be misutilized. But there is possible in writing characters whose goal is their partner, whose goal revolves around their partner, and or potentially a love interest, and still have them be a stand-alone character in the story. Himeno from Chainsaw Man is controversial, and that's not entirely unfounded. She spends much of the series being, frankly, a wreck, desperately trying to get one of our male leads to run away with her, putting others in harm's way just to ensure her and his survival, even sacrificing herself to make sure he survives. So why is she different from women I've previously mentioned? Simply put, her life is heavily motivated by Aki, but she does not live for Aki. Throughout the series, we get small glimpses into who Himeno really is. The real Himeno, not the whore / sex fiend, not the alcoholic, not the smoker, but we find a truly broken, scared, lonely person. She is that way outside of Aki, and many of her decisions, although take Aki into account, don't exist solely for Aki. She takes up smoking as a way to satiate herself. She sleeps around, although wanting to end up with Aki still, prioritizing her own vices. She drinks and she lets loose to allow her to drop that professional act, even if just for one night. Even her death, for example. She has lived a relatively long life for those in her industry. And although her final moments are that of sacrifice to save Aki, her love, in this moment, we see her on full display, and in this act, it is not entirely for Aki. She reveals to us in her final monologue, Aki is more than just a fling. In her life, more than just a person, even. Aki represents the one thing Himeno has let go of throughout her career. Aki represents the thing that she hasn't seen in this fucked up world that she's been living in her whole life. Aki is the humanity that she wishes to save. Aki is a goal, an ideal, not a human, but a concept.
Aki is still capable of crying. People die so often in this field that most devil hunters don't have any tears left to shed. Not Aki, though. I remember thinking how odd he was, going off to bawl like a baby in private when the rookies he was looking after bit the dust. Having someone care for you enough to cry like that must be nice.
She herself has fallen victim to losing her own humanity, finding herself unable to properly mourn for her previous partners. She accepts the job and what it is, and becomes the very monsters that she hunts, and frankly, she has no qualms with that. Aki does, however. No matter how many of his colleagues die, no matter how many people he meets, he cries. He mourns, and he does it all in a way that Himeno thinks is right, morally correct, something she wishes she could still do. When Himeno sacrifices herself, she isn't just doing it to save a man she loves. She's doing it to secure the world she wants to see. Aki needs to live, not just because Himeno loves him, but because Aki represents what Himeno needs to believe in. Aki is the hope that Himeno has for the world, that Himeno wants to see in the world. With that said, we are getting to our final class of character in this fucked up video, if you will, of disappointment. And I can't help but have a soft spot for the good ones and the bad ones in this class, the femme fatale. The femme fatale has been around for longer than most people watching this video have actually been alive. This subclass of female characters is also one of the most popular and usually one of mine, if not my favorite tropes when being seen by a wider audience. A common trope, and it often places females in more promiscuous positions and more blatantly sexual positions, but contrast that with unusually high lethality. Now, yes, these women may be capable and may be more poignant to the story than most of the other categories on this list. However, the biggest part of this trope that makes it problematic, if you will, is the over-hypersexualization of most women in this class. The biggest problem comes from fierce, capable, and strong women can never just be fierce and capable. They have to be sexual. They have to be objectively eye-catching in a more desirable way to both the main character and the audience, depending on who in which the subject matter is more poignant. Capability is dependent on their sexual appeal rather than their actual abilities to take advantage of situations, or even if they are cunning, intelligent, or driving opponents and or opposition and or even protagonists, it is always paired and coupled with their sexuality. Take my first example, Esdeath from Akame ga Kill. Now, throughout the entirety of Akame ga Kill, Esdeath is the primary threat. She is not the primary antagonist, however, she is the person that everyone is the most afraid of. Yet, coincidentally, Esdeath is one of the characters that wears the most revealing and slutty outfits. I mean, for God's sake, her power is literally linked to her chest. Her tits being on display is linked to her power. Another part of Esdeath that becomes core to this idea of femme fatality and the idea of sexual desirability being linked to her strength is Esdeath is a warlord character. She has no interest in anything but conquering and devouring those around her. That is until she all of a sudden, when the narrative needs her to, have a strange, out-of-place love and romance arc. She not only is falling under these tropes of femme fatale, where she is sexy and capable, she is now also doing this all out of the sheer lust for a man. She no longer is self-driven, rather she is driven to find a love interest and to find someone who can better match her. Esdeath being such a formidable and basically the strongest character in the series, opponent is always a formidable roadblock for our main cast. However, when we get more deeper into the story, basically every decision Esdeath makes revolves around this man character, our main character Tatsumi. There are entire side stories that admittedly do take away from the main plot of just sheer absurdity, where she will just reinforce her own obsession with this man, not to mention her clear, undeniable sex appeal. Everyone loves a woman in uniform, especially one that shows off her hips and her tits, as previously mentioned. Although Esdeath fits into this femme fatale role into a clear-cut idea, she is surrounded by a lot of other women in the series. There are so many other women that maybe are still hypersexualized, do show capable aspects of themselves without sexuality being a direct contrast or correlation to their capability. Take the boss, for example. This isn't to say that femme fatale women are always going to be surrounded by capable women. Rather, my next example is quite the opposite, and there's only a few capable women in the series, and any of them and all of them are all very hypersexualized. But I'll be focusing on one, Merlin from the Seven Deadly Sins. Now, throughout the series of Seven Deadly Sins, you actually don't get to see Merlin right off the bat. He is always given this title of the strongest, the smartest, and she's got this mysterious air to her where she knows more than the viewer and the other characters in the world, always linking to that she knows more. Not even to mention her name in itself. The name Merlin is part of a famous fairy tale for the King of Arthur. He, in the fairy tale, is known as being the most wide, knowledgeable character throughout the entire world. She also is given her salt during many interactions. Merlin lives up to her namesake. She is a clear spectrum of powerhouse, and she is so blatantly over-sexualized. She wears the least amount of clothes in all of the characters. Not that many of the women have that much clothing, and or if they do, it's not very helpful. Rather, she is literally wearing basically panties and a overcoat that does. Of course, the woman who is the most capable, most knowledgeable, and most threatening in the world also is basically naked. To mention all of the other issues with Seven Deadly Sins, since the faults of the Seven Deadly Sins, it'd be easier to say what it does right, which isn't much. From the childlike characters being sexualized to the storyline of taking care of your loved one from when they are a baby, it's a very interesting series that really I wish ended with the Merlin trope, but somehow keeps going and keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So let's lean into a series that honestly I've talked about a lot in this video, but does have some good examples, yet still fails in femme fatality. Let's talk about Daki from Demon Slayer. Now, Daki, if you don't know, is the upper moon, in which her introduction is set with a very high standard. She has killed multiple Hashira all by herself and is one of the strongest living demons. She is an upper moon. That is the highest level that you can obtain as a demon. She has some really big shoes to fill, and in the beginning, she does, demonstrating intelligence when she spies on Tengen in the Red Light District, and strength to overpower our primary three protagonists. Now, her femme fatality all comes to a halt, because firstly, let's not even mention the outfit design. You could not give her less clothes if you tried. Secondly, when she is involved with capable men, all of a sudden Daki becomes unintelligent and unable to honestly do much. Daki becomes overwhelmed and outmatched by Tengen almost instantly, within not even seconds of meeting him. Tengen swiftly swipes her head clean off of her shoulders, and she proceeds to cry and throw a fit about the situation, rather than contain herself to be the threatening upper moon that we assume her to be at this point. Then, as is in tradition in anime, a man comes to save the damsel. We find out that all this power and prestige that Daki has claimed for herself and or worked up to at this point, all of this essence of strength and fatality from her isn't actually her. It's her older brother, and her as a character isn't that strong at all, if even given any air of seriousness by the other characters around her. Now, my problem comes in where Daki is so outclassed by her brother. I'm not saying that this storyline can't be done and can't be done successfully. I mean, by far, it can. You can indeed have, and it is an interesting idea to make one character seem to be the threat and the other be the threat. The problem comes in where Daki and her older brother are seemingly supposed to be a pair, an equal, if you will. But her brother is so clearly outclassed by, or she is so clearly outclassed by her brother that it's hard to take her seriously at all, and not just another demon that we've seen. Especially when we've seen this storyline be done already with Rui's storyline, where we've seen the family dynamic of demons and how one can be so much stronger than the other. In this specific situation, it was another sibling dynamic where one demon was not anywhere up to par, was treated as this strong, independent demon, but then once facing adversity, all of a sudden that strength fatality goes away. Daki goes from a capable and more condescending, frankly, cunt-giving energy who was originally serving conniving, evil, and overall wicked behavior to a brat who, frankly, gets slaughtered. She doesn't show the same potential that she did in the beginning of us meeting her. She is beginning to get outclassed by just two of our trio, who are both fatally injured, yet somehow these characters who she previously was able to easily handle now become a massive threat to her. Not only that, but she becomes more and more dependent on her brother as the fight goes on, with the implication being that he is moving for her and that she no longer has the autonomy with her third eye developing. This is an example of a femme fatale who is introduced as a threat, but once you break down who they are and what their actual role in the story is, they just kind of become a sex object or a comedic purpose, a B-plot, if you will, that really has no merit and the viewer doesn't seem to care about because she seems more of a speed bump than an actual roadblock. Every time you see Daki in a fight, frankly, the viewer naturally doesn't care because there's a much more serious fight going on between Tengen, her older brother, and Tanjiro. She goes from a threat to an annoyance, and her brother is given all of the villainous development, apologizing for her sins, and still, in the end, all she does is whine and cry. Rather than giving these characters this beautiful moment, which they did admittedly try to do, Daki is still treated as a massive brat and given a last second, oh, but she loved him and chooses to go to hell with him. Even though, in the end, I don't think many people gave a fuck where Daki went. Now, with all that being said, femme fatality can be used in a narrative without sexualizing a woman to a degree that it takes away her merit as a character. The shining star of sexuality in women in femme fatality is the character who I have dressed as, which I don't want to hear it. Look, I know this is a bit of a rougher cosplay. It's been a rough beginning of the year. But is Makima. She is a character shrouded in ambiguity, and the moment you meet her as a viewer, you are instantly encapsulated by her. Instantaneously, Maki gives our main character of Chainsaw Man, Denji, a choice between working for her or death. Quite an assertive character from the jump, who becomes more and more intriguing and more threatening the longer you get to know her and see her. Makima's shining quality is in comparison to other examples of femme fatales. Makima inherently isn't sexual. I mean, look at me. There is nothing inherently sexual about me in this outfit. She wears a trench coat and a button-up, and at no point is there ever really an emphasis on her body outside of her in this outfit, which is inherently not sexual. Rather, Makima sexualizes herself to gain an advantage on other characters in the story. The best example of this is with Denji himself. Makima constantly plays with Denji's hopes and dreams to want to have a sexual encounter with a woman, both in the full 9 yards of raw sex with a woman, but also in little ways that just give him enough of a taste to want more. A massive aspect of this trope is the problematic sexualization that truly serves no role in the story, and Makima flips that straight on its head, where sexualization is a core concept to her character, not to give fan service, but to make sure that in the end, Makima always has control. She is never out of control. She quite literally always knows everyone's next move, and she honestly manages to control the entire narrative. Not just her subordinates, but also those above her, or who is seemingly above her. But I want to talk about more about Makima in this over-sexualization and controlling, in that it's not just Denji, and it's not just people above her, but we even see small aspects of this in other characters who, for example, her and Aki's relationship never is sexual. However, we do know that she has clearly used some sort of playing with Aki's wants, hopes, and dreams to further serve her narrative goals. And beyond that, even the characters who aren't under Makima's thumb directly still can't help but be under her control. Take Kishiba, for example, who is at her mercy regardless of what he thinks of her, regardless of how much he doesn't see eye to eye with her, and regardless of how much he thinks that she is not what she says she is. It's done so tactically to prove that not only is Makima a threat, but is honestly the end of the series. She is implied to have this power that is incomprehensible, blindfolding even those who assumedly are high-ranking members of her same company. She works for the government, but it's in the palm of her hands. And this is all done through Makima's sexual... And so much of this is done through Makima's sexual palpability. After all, you can't help but look at Makima and not entirely understand what she's doing. However, you can't help but look. You need to know. You want to see what this mysterious woman who plays into this sexual aspect of her own, not because the author wants her to, but because she wants to always be in control. But by the time you find out what she is in control of, it's already out of your and the character's control. To be very clear, all the characters I've criticized or praised are not done so with the intent to change your mind on them. You're welcome to hate any of the characters I love, and you're welcome to love any of the characters I hate. That's what it means to be human. We are all individual. Like or dislike them to your own accord. This video is mainly to change the way in which maybe you think about the characters mentioned, even if it's subtly. This video is not intended to change your mind on characters that you love or hate, nor hate or love the people who created them. Rather, I just want to criticize these characters, honestly. Media is something that's super important to me. I think it's one of the core foundations of our society. I think it's a fundamental pillar in how we develop as adults and how we become who we are as humans, is what representation we see and or don't get to see. It's why I want to talk about specifically women, something that I feel like with things like Barbie and with people like Taylor Swift being so successful, I want to discuss the aspects of femininity and womanhood, especially one that I personally feel such a connection with. I want people to be aware of what tropes there are and how to view tropes and how to honestly just view media and be critical of it. I hope that this video, if even seen by one person, can make that one person think a little bit harder about these anime tropes, and not just about these tropes, but about how women are seen in media in general. To be perfectly honest, some of these characters I heavily dislike, which I'm sure you can tell which ones they are, but a lot of them I really love and have a dear place in my heart, even if they are problematic. As a writer, I love to look at work and hear negative criticism of my own work. And it can sting, but I like to think that that's what every artist wants to know, where they can improve, where they can further develop, and obviously where they went right, and how other artists can learn from where they went right. I also have a tendency to definitively overanalyze the media that I watch to a very high degree, and I will be the first to admit that and won't be the last. But at the end of the day, these characters aren't real, and they don't have an impact outside of the people who watch them, but media does have a greater impact, and I can't help but wonder if we had more female characters that were good examples of the classes that I mentioned, and more male protagonists that were more equal to the women in their series, would there be less of a problem when looking at women in media? That's obviously food for pondering, and honestly something that you can think on and have your own opinion on and comment down below. And I want to make this clear. Men and women can be miswritten equally. There 100% is bad written male characters in even the series that I mentioned in this video, if you will. However, I just think that the topic of women is just so much more fruitful, if you will, for obvious reasons. If you find this video interesting, and you're interested in things that I do outside of this channel, I write a manga/graphic novel myself called Reaper is Human. It's linked down below. I post all of my art on Twitter, and I have a newly found art portfolio, and you can hire me, actually, as an artist, if you're interested. I have a gaming YouTube channel, and I have lots of other things and lots of other projects that I plan on releasing down below. But for now, I've been Enigma Bazaar, and goodbye!